Joining us now is Jeremy Scahill, co-founder of Dropsite News, great friend of the show. Good to see you, Jeremy.
Thanks for having me back.
So, Jeremy, we broke down a little bit of your reporting and the White House's denials via Axios. Why don't you just break down more, if you can, about these alleged communications that Steve Witkoff and the White House are denying happened, and which the Iranians are saying, yeah, they keep reaching out to us and we're basically leaving him on red this entire time.
I think it was on the third day of the Israeli-U.S. bombing of Iran, I started hearing from Iranian officials who were telling me off the record at first. They were saying, it's interesting because a number of third countries have been sending messages to Iran saying that the Trump administration wants to start back-end talks about sort of, endgame, and if Iran is interested in having some kind of dialogue. And my understanding in that early stage was that Iran's political leadership had made a decision that they were not going to talk for one central reason, that they felt that that the primary goal in this war was to send a message that the U.S. and Israel can't just bomb Iran every 4 months and pretend to be engaging in negotiations. And so, they informed those third-party countries that Iran is not interested in talking. And then you started having Trump, once he was informed of this, and this is from the perspective of the Iranians, start saying openly, oh, the Iranians are begging us to talk. The Iranians want to make a deal. I'm not ready to talk to them yet. And then, some days after that, so this was early last week, I was told by a senior Iranian official that Steve Witkoff had sent WhatsApp messages to Iranian officials, including Abbas Araghchi, the country's foreign minister. And I said, oh, I want to go to Witkoff and ask him that. That's what I told the Iranians. And they said, well, this is still off the record because we haven't figured out if we're going to respond or how we're going to deal with this. So I was sort of informed of this for several days. Mm-hmm. And then I kept pushing the Iranian sources. And I said, I want to go to Witkoff and ask him about this because Trump keeps saying over and over that the Iranians are begging him to talk. And the Iranian officials were saying, can you imagine Abbas Araghchi, the foreign minister of Iran, like texting Steve Witkoff, the guy who he was supposedly negotiating with when they turned around and bombed? He absolutely has not. And they said, in fact, we're just trying to figure out like what our diplomatic response is going to be to this. Do we tell him we're not ready or do we just ignore him? And what they ended up on was, we're not going to respond to him at all. What they have done, though, is this is what they've told me, that they've told third-party countries that Iran's demands include a ceasefire that would apply to not only Iran, but to Lebanon and Iraq as well, that they want reparations for the damage that has been done in this war, and that they want a UN Security Council resolution. But they still aren't at that point because they feel that the deterrence has not been established firmly enough yet to try to raise the costs so high that the U.S. wouldn't consider doing this again in a few months' time. So then the intermediaries from other countries go back and they've told this to Trump. And, you get some flashes of reality from Trump sometimes where he's saying, when he says, I think they want to talk, but they're not ready yet. They're not just around to the position. I think part of what he is revealing to the public there is that he's aware that Iran's position is we're not going to engage in a ceasefire right now. And so what happened yesterday was I go to the White House and I sent Steve Witkoff a WhatsApp message because apparently that's his preferred way of communicating. And I asked, I asked for comment on this. And typically when we go to the White House, they do give us comment, but it'll be, sort of a copy and paste of whatever Trump's latest statement was. They'll say, I refer you to the president's remarks on this. But in this case, they send this response that read like Trump had dictated it himself for his Truth Social feed, calling Dropsite abhorrent and saying that we're carrying water for the Islamic, terrorist regime, and that we're engaging in what they called America Last behavior. And the only reason that I think it wasn't Trump doing it is because there were no all caps in it. But other than that, it basically was like a Truth Social post. And, there's an old saying in journalism that, you never know that a story is true until it's officially denied.
Yes.
And I think this is a case where they then freaked out about this because it's humiliating. And they go to one of their favorite journalists, Barack Ravid, and they spin the Alice in Wonderland upside down version of this. And it's like they could solve this in 2 seconds. show Arachi's text messages where he's begging Steve Witkoff to talk. That would be my challenge to them. Okay, Steve Witkoff, let's see the text messages and put them out. Because what the Iranians are saying is there aren't any text messages for anyone to put out from their end.
Yeah. Well, and the timeline there makes sense too, because you said it was day 3 where Witkoff starts reaching out like, hey guys, you up, ? And Trump reportedly thought this would be over in 4 days. So that would be the time period where they're like, all right, we killed their leader and we've destroyed all their capabilities. They have to be willing to capitulate now, right? And then, are just completely ignored by them. I wanted to get your reaction, Jeremy, to this news that broke overnight that top Iranian official Ali Larjani and Basij commander Ghulam Reza Soleimani were both killed overnight. This is according to Israel's defense minister, Katz, in separate strikes. How significant of a blow is, if confirmed, how significant of a blow is this to the Iranians?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's significant that Israel Katz came out and said this rather than it just being speculation or something in the media. But again, Iran has not confirmed this yet. I mean, Ali Larjani is one of the most important figures in Iran going back to the 1990s, and he was involved with nuclear negotiations going back to the 1990s. He's also a scholar of Kant, a highly educated man. He recently was named as the secretary of the Supreme National Security Council, which is the most important, security apparatus in Iran. But he was I think viewed, and I've just been talking to sources in Iran, and they said, if confirmed, what this means is that the Israelis have assassinated one of the figures that would have been a more moderate voice in any discussions that lead to the end of this war or sort of what happens next. And there was some suspicion that I've heard that part of why the Israelis wanted to assassinate Ali Larjani was not just because of his role in the national security apparatus and this war, but also because Trump has been indicating that he may want to just try to make a deal with Iran and may not want to go, all the way to completely smashing or dismantling the state. So, it's certainly significant. And I think that the pattern that we've seen is that when figures like Larjani or others who are considered in a more moderate camp, that when they're taken out, the people that replace them tend to take a much harder line. And so, how this is going to impact things, I think this is Netanyahu hoping that another phase opens up where there's uprisings within Iran. We haven't seen any evidence of that yet, but I think the Israelis are very much pushing and hoping that happens and trying to facilitate that happening. And I think it's also, to an extent, attempt to make sure that there aren't really going to be these kinds of figures around to talk toward the end of the war.
Very much like the Hamas strategy, right? Back in with Gaza. So very much of the playbook. We've all talked about it now a lot over the years. We do want to talk about Witkoff. Let's put A8 up there on the screen. Apparently, Witkoff is a staunch supporter of Israel. I think we knew that, but apparently counts Miriam Adelson as a dear friend and carries a custom pager gifted to him by Netanyahu and senior Mossad officials. I have to be honest, Jeremy, I think I misread Witkoff. So Witkoff obviously was one of those people who pressured Benjamin Netanyahu early on in the Trump administration. He pressured the ceasefire, seemed to be somewhat of a diplomat or somebody who was diplomatic in the way that he shed some of the pre-existing notions about way things should happen, open to talking to anybody, to Putin. I said, oh, wow, I appreciate that. I praised him a lot here. Is he showing us his true colors? Is he totally out of his depth? Is the way that the Iranians seem to play it? What's your understanding, having talked to the counterparties on the other side?
I mean, I don't know. I don't know that you entirely got it wrong. And you and I talked about Witkoff at that time when this first started. I think Witkoff is also a manifestation of part of what's happened with Trump as well. In his first term as president, Trump was very nervous about sort of waging a wider war against Iran. There was great consternation about the decision to assassinate Qasem Soleimani. The neocon wing of the Trump base or that administration was a minority player in the running of the administration. And then Trump 2.0 now, you have the Miriam Adelson Netanyahu wing of the MAGA movement that has literally purchased this part of American foreign policy. Trump is not an ideological person. You know, he is a businessman. I don't believe he's a religious man. I don't believe he believes in much of anything. And so he's sort of been purchased to an extent, bought in other ways. And I think that he sets the tone for what Witkoff is going to be. So when Trump was running for president this time, I think genuinely he was telling Witkoff, you need to force Bibi to do this. And so when those are the deployment orders from Trump to his real estate buddy, I think Witkoff was a key player in sort of, pushing that Gaza deal through. At the same time, though, you have Jared Kushner, who is an ideological religious figure that has a different level of connections to the entire Israel situation. And I think that Witkoff has been radicalized immensely. It's not that he wasn't already a Zionist. It's not that he already didn't have some of these convictions. But I think that those tendencies within Witkoff were brought out by this whole situation, and he was sort of radicalized to become a fanatical Zionist Israel firster. And it's just, it shows you what happens when you get put in this meat grinder of ideology. And Netanyahu's been doing this since the 1990s, and they have really successfully played Witkoff. And I think that Kushner has also successfully played both Witkoff and Trump.
Interesting.
Jeremy, I wanted to know what you make of Trump's increasingly desperate efforts to convince U.S. allies to join him in some fool's errand of attempting to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. It seems that, among the many things certainly he didn't anticipate, he seemed to not believe they would actually close the strait. There's also been reporting that a lot of war planners thought that, it's possible they close the Strait of Hormuz, but that would be very damaging to them as well. But it seems the Iranians have been able to not fully close the strait, but be able to pick and choose. Hey, this ship can come through. Our exports are going out to China. But if you're, an ally of the U.S. or Israel, you're not coming through. You're not going to be able to do what you want to do here. So what do you make of how central this has become to the war effort?
I mean, it's extremely central. And I think, Iran has been wargaming this for many years. In fact, weeks before this war happened, in the month of February 2026, Iran did war games in the Strait of Hormuz that included operations aimed at shutting it down or attacking any quote unquote enemy vessels, military vessels that tried to come into the Strait of Hormuz. So, we don't even have to back up that far. We can say that literally days before this war began, the Iranians were wargaming those types of scenarios in the Strait of Hormuz. I think that, we have to connect this, though, Crystal, to the fact that the Marine Expeditionary Units are being deployed. That could be anywhere between 2,000 and 5,000 troops. These are sort of the 911 forces of the U.S. Military. They may try to take this island, Kharg Island, that they bombed repeatedly. 90% of Iran's oil passes through there. Trump says that he hasn't yet decided to bomb the actual oil that's on that island, but you could see discussion about trying to seize that as a territory. Trump's having an enormous difficult time getting any nations to agree to deploy. The German chancellor, who has largely acted sort of like a poodle for Trump since he became the leader of Germany, issued a statement yesterday, and multiple German officials said, we're not going to get involved with this. They said the Americans and Israelis didn't tell us about this beforehand. They said they didn't need us. So now all of a sudden they want us to go there. It's not a NATO mission. I think if the Trump administration wants to start attempting to escort ships through there, you're going to be much closer to Iran's coastal territory. You're going to put yourself in range of short-range missiles, and you have the possibility of many more Americans dying. I don't think the world really has an appetite for this at all. But we've seen, and you guys have reported on this, Trump doesn't seem to be fully listening to what military advisors are saying. And I think that if they're contemplating putting boots on the ground, then Americans should brace for more coffins coming home draped in the American flag. And it's shocking to say that you can't rule out that they're contemplating this right now. But it's real. It's true. And the neocon wing of the MAGA movement is in pole position right now in this White House.
Very, very, very true. Jeremy, thank you as always for joining us. Keep it up. Dropsite News, link down in the description. We appreciate you, man. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you guys for all your work.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show. Help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.